I have had the opportunity to be here this morning to hear glowing introductions of both of you and to hear from my colleagues on the other nominees. And let me just say I'm delighted that you're willing to step forward. You're both bright, qualified individuals. Dennis, you and I got to work together quite a bit in your previous roles. And we need you. And we need you right now. I'm sure Bob Lighthizer is very eager to have you on board. As a former USTR, I can tell you those deputies are absolutely essential. And Dennis, I'm sure you know Peter Allgaier, who did a terrific job for me at WTO, and have talked to him. And CJ, if you haven't reached out to Karan Bhatia or Susan Schwab yet, they would be terrific people to talk to, and I'd love to give you input. I appreciate what you said on currency manipulation. I'm one of those Republicans that actually agrees it does affect trade, and we ought to deal with it. And with regard to NAFTA, CJ, I think you're going to have an opportunity to do so. My understanding is the Mexican government is open to it as long as it doesn't affect the conduct of monetary policy, as they say, which is not the idea. So I hope you will include it, as even though they are not manipulators, but it would present a precedent for the future. To Mr. Shea on WTO, you talked about China. I know you have a background in this and China playing by the rules. Let me ask you about a specific case, just as an example. Right now, you're going to be inheriting, should you be confirmed, a key WTO case on subsidies to producers of primary aluminum. Currently, China provides subsidies through artificially cheap loans. They also do it through artificially low-priced inputs for aluminum production, including energy inputs, which obviously is key to that, coal and electricity costs. I have supported filing this case because I know it'll help. We have a manufacturer in Ohio, as an example, Penex Aluminum in Latonia, just as one example, one of the many Ohio companies and American companies that would benefit directly from it, and had the opportunity to visit with them. I think if we're able to compete on a level playing field, we'll be fine with regard to aluminum and other products, but it's not fair. So more broadly, I want to hear you talk about how we protect our interests at WTO, but specifically, can I get any of your thoughts on this aluminum subsidies case?
Yes, thank you, Senator. First on aluminum, on the aluminum case, in my capacity on the U.S.-China Commission, we have written extensively on subsidies in the aluminum sector as well as in steel and other industrial sectors. My understanding of this case, it's part of an overall review in the administration of all things aluminum. So, if confirmed, I would hope to work, closely with you, on that. I think a very important case in the WTO that affects all, particularly all sectors of our economy, particularly industrial sectors, is the non-market economy status. China, we did not agree, the WTO members did not agree that after a certain period of time, China would, market conditions would automatically be deemed to exist in China, regardless of what the facts on the ground might reveal. And as you well know, the facts on the ground in China reveal a non-market economy. State-invested enterprises control key sectors of the economy. They pursue government-directed industrial policies. They receive preferential treatment from state banks. The state banking sector is overwhelmingly controlled by the government.
And Mr. Shea, I think it's really important that you continue to hold firm on our position and keep the Europeans on board too, because at some points they have wavered, and my understanding is right now they're willing to stick with us because the facts on the ground don't defend the Chinese position, which is that they ought to become a market economy for purposes, particularly of our trade cases that are pending, you're talking about, but also at the WTO, but also our anti-dumping cases and our countervailing duty cases. So I thank you for that. I'm glad you have that background. Mr. Mahoney, just quickly on exports, one thing that I think you will find as you get into this job is that where we have a trade agreement, a free trade agreement with another country, we do pretty well. In fact, we only have trade agreements with 10% of the global economy, yet we send 47% of our exports there. We actually have a trade surplus in the aggregate with our trading partners. And sometimes in the administration, I'm concerned that there is too much criticism of trade agreements, when in fact, trade agreements are not really the issue. China is not in a trade agreement with us, nor is Japan, nor is Europe, as an example. In Ohio, I will tell you, we send 60% of our exports to our trading partners. About half go to just two, Canada being number one, Mexico being number two. So in terms of the importance of NAFTA, which you said earlier, I hope you will continue to work with us on that. We have a national trade deficit, yes, of $500 billion, but it's actually not the fault of our trade agreements where we're able to open more markets. I hope that you will, in this job, be willing to open even more markets for our farmers and our service providers and our manufacturers. In Ohio, it's 1 out of every 4 jobs. 25% of our export of our manufacturing jobs, factory jobs, are exporting jobs. Can you speak briefly about that?
Yes, Senator, I agree with you. I think that reducing barriers to American exports is what I see as central to the job that I will have if I'm confirmed. We tolerate too many barriers to market access, particularly in agriculture and the services, where we maintain such a tremendous competitive advantage. And services is an area where we have an aggregate trade surplus of $250 billion, which reduced the overall trade deficit by a third, I think, the last time that the numbers were available in 2016. So I think that it's absolutely critical that USTR be on the front lines trying to reduce barriers to American exports in other countries, and I'm fully committed to doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.